Get ready. Come on. Get ready. Hey. Get ready for Betty and Michelle, Phyllis and Stephanie. There's a new show called Good Grief, Good Gossip, Good God, called it G3. Education, celebration, transparency. There's no subject they won't tackle if it uplifts you and me. Good grief, good gossip, good God, G3.
Hi, this is Betty Valle, and we're here for another edition of the 3Gs, Good Grief, Good Gossip, Good God. I am going to be leading the co-hosts on this, but you know the way we do it, we work it around. So let me just introduce my co-hosts on the G3 show, Stephanie Lackey. Wave your hand, Miss Stephanie. And we have Miss Phyllis Clark. Phyllis Clark, wave your hand, baby. And our co-host, Michelle Porter, is not with us this time because, sometimes we in, sometimes we out, sometimes we got stuff going on in our lives because we're Black women. That's why. So you see us coming in and out. So we share the chores here. But I am so excited tonight about this show. And in fact, it's a very important show. And it may be one of the most important shows that we have done in a while. Although our last two shows about grief were very powerful. And we hope that you'll go back and catch them on the SSC Live Network. But today our speaker is Lonita Baker. And she used to belong to Louisville, but now she belongs to the world because we saw that Breonna Lonita was the lead lawyer for Breonna Taylor's family. And we all know Breonna Taylor. Her name is now rolling off the names of people who will never know her all over the world. I just saw something with John Baptiste, who just won his Oscar for the best song for the movie Soul. And he mentioned Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor's name has gone out into the world. So she is beyond what we think. She is, say her name. And whenever we think about criminal justice in America and the mistreatment of African American at the hands of police, Breonna Taylor's name will forever be lifted up. But I think we also realize that perhaps if what had not happened to George Floyd had not happened, we may not even know her name. Breonna Taylor's family didn't get to have a big public funeral on TV with all of the different ministers and stuff there. We didn't know about Breonna Taylor for a long time because she was just another one in a long line of Black people killed by police and whose stories were not being told. But the people in this community made sure that her name went out into the world. And the sister leading the charge on behalf of Breonna Taylor's family was none other than Lonita Baker. Thank you. Welcome, Juris Doctor, lawyer. You know what I'm saying. Just all around bad girl. We are so proud of how you represented that family. And I wanted to ask you first about how you connected with Breonna Taylor's family. How did they find you out of all the lawyers? How did you get to be on the case?
Well, I had, prior to taking on Breonna Taylor's case, I had done a few civil rights cases in the city of Louisville. One being Tayon Lee, the 18-year-old who was stopped for unconstitutionally stopped for a traffic offense on Dixie Highway, and pulled out of his car, handcuffed and searched. Stopped, not unlike we saw Reverend Cosby when he was pulled over. LMPD pulling people over, baseless stops, and harassing the Western Louisville. And so that did get me a lot of local attention. I also represented Terry Whitehead, who's an inmate at the Department of Corrections, who was handcuffed, and the corrections officers had beaten him while he was handcuffed, and that was on video. They were federally charged, indicted, pled guilty, and they are now serving sentences for that attack of him. But those stories did get me some media attention prior to Breonna being killed. And so her family actually reached out to our office the day after Breonna was killed. So, she was killed on Friday, March 13th. I remember the story coming on the news while sitting at home. We were just beginning to work from home. So I remember seeing, that a police officer had been shot. And all the news said at that point was one suspect was dead, one suspect was in custody. Not knowing anything else at that time, it didn't really, not too many thoughts entered my head. But then the next day, when I got a call from someone stating that, they were the family of the young lady that was killed the day before, I felt that obligation to definitely sit down, talk to them, and learn more about what happened. And when I met Breonna's family, it was her mother, her aunts, Breonna's little sister that came into my office. And hearing them talk about Breonna, the person, and then hearing how everything happened, I knew something had went wrong. And so I felt it was my obligation to investigate further. And that's what I did. And so from the March 14th, Sam Magyar and myself, we've been right there alongside Breonna's family.
Mm. Lonita, tell us how that made you feel. What was your first thought, when they reached out to you?
Well, one is always it's a position of honor, but it's also terrifying because you don't know what happened. And civil rights cases are very hard. And when I talk to other attorneys thinking about taking civil rights cases, I always tell them that it's a gut thing. You can't do these cases based off, just I'm going to follow the law. Like, it's really emotional. And so your gut and I guess we say our gut, but is it God's? We're talking about good God. Is it God that's telling you this is, I'm putting this here for you. It's your time. Because I'll be honest, I would not have made it through 2020 without God and following his direction, because it's so easy. When you get a case of that magnitude, as Betty said, like, everyone was saying Breonna's name, whether it was WNBA players, whether it's LeBron James, bringing in Attorney Crump, who is a good friend of mine, but everyone around the world was saying Breonna's name. And so it would be easily to lose track of what my goal was and what my purpose was in being a part of that fight. But I stayed the course, and I always, I probably prayed harder in the last year than I prayed especially as it relates to work, than I've prayed over any case in my career.
And initially, Breonna was a suspect. Is that right?
That's what the news said. They called her a suspect.
A suspect. And that's what I'm saying becomes the issue, is if you're Black, you're a suspect. And if we need to remind anybody, Breonna Taylor was in her home, and you maybe can tell it better, Lonita. Just say again what happened. She was in her home with her fiance, and then what happened? At what time of night?
So this was after 12:30 in the morning. So, well after midnight. Breonna had fallen asleep. Kenny Walker, as he tells us, he was on his way dozing off. So more so they had fallen asleep watching a movie. He said his words, the movie was more so watching them than they were watching the movie. They hear banging at the door, not knowing what it is. And they're asking, who is it? Who is it? And no one's responding on the other side of the door. So, jolted out of their sleep, not knowing who's at the door, trying to hurry up and throw on clothes to get to the door to see who is this knocking. And since no one's responding, Kenneth does grab his legally owned firearm, as he's entitled to do. In Kentucky, we're entitled to protect our home. As soon as they get outside, breach the bedroom doorway, into the hallway, the door flies off the handle, and Kenny let off a single shot because it's dark. He doesn't know who's coming in, trying to protect the home. And what he says is, I fired the shot thinking whoever's trying to get in here, they're like, oh, they're armed, they're gonna leave, because they're thinking like maybe it's someone trying to break in, trying to get the things that they have in there. Because they're both working individuals. Breonna was working two jobs at that time. That was her first day off. They had been on a date the night before, went to Texas Roadhouse, had come home, was playing, they played Uno, and then we're watching the movie. And this is what happened. Someone who did, like, this was the day off, definitely not expecting that. And we heard, as we heard that once the 911 call was released, and you heard the agony in Kenny's voice saying, someone busted in the door and they shot my girlfriend. Even as he's calling 911, he does not know that it was police that came into that apartment. And I honestly say that at that moment, they thought Kenny was dead too, or they would have come in sooner. And I think it was only when the 911 dispatch operator called out saying, hey, someone's calling, break in this home, that they realized, oh shoot, someone's in there alive. And that's another one of those but God moments, because if it were not for Kenny, we never would have known how any of this went down from their perspective on the inside. So
They would have been suspects and dead.
Yes,
And
exactly.
And we have seen since then, you won a major settlement for her family. And there's also been a lot of discussion about these no-knock warrants. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely. Just historically, no-knock warrants are dangerous. And while we know what happened to Breonna Taylor, we don't know how many previous Breonna Taylors there were. But what we do know is when you look historically and nationwide at no-knock warrants, we see too many people that have been killed or injured, and these are innocent people killed or injured during the execution of these warrants. There's a 2-year-old baby whose face was completely disfigured because they entered into this home and threw a flash grenade into the crib. And so, they're usually getting these warrants for to locate narcotics. No amount of drugs that you could ever find justifies the risk that is posed by going into people's house without announcing yourselves, and not just the risk to civilians, innocent bystanders, but the risk also to officers. We've seen situations where officers have been killed or seriously injured in the execution of these warrants because people are defending the right to protect, or exercising the right to defend their home and protect their home, and they've been found not guilty by juries. And so it's not just dangerous for people, it's dangerous for officers too. So I think banning no-knock warrants is definitely the way to go. And I do have to note, absolutely no drugs or drug money was found in Breonna's home. Not that I have to justify anything, but we also know, that the officers lied to even get the search warrant for her apartment to begin with. And so it's just so many things that went wrong within LMPD leading to that fateful night that everyone should be upset with the way it was handled, and everyone should be calling for changes, whether you like Mayor Fisher, you don't like Mayor Fisher, whether you like the new chief or not. We have to demand changes because Breonna was me, any of us, any of our children, any of our sisters, and we shouldn't have to wait until it hits more closely to us to use our voices and to speak up.
And what's fascinating is her family, I think, what was the settlement? 25 million?
No, ours was 12 million.
12 million. $12 million that in effect the taxpayers have to pay out. So in other words, we are paying to be murdered. We have to pay the cost. And so we've got one officer charged, and the other officers who were involved in that, there's still trials to come and other issues that have not been resolved yet.
Yeah, so the FBI is investigating whether to charge the officers. And I always have to say, because of the inaction of our Attorney General, the officer that is pending charges is not pending charges as it relates to Breonna, but for bullets that went into other apartments around Breonna's.
And we should say that our Attorney General is an African American who recently said that systemic racism does not exist. So we can just, leave that right where it is on the porch. Phyllis, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I have a question. Well, hey, Lonita, so good to you and to watch all of the seismic shifts that you are involved in. I just want to ask you, a couple of things have come up for me since listening to you. What do you think about the Department of Justice now be starting to weigh in on what LMPD is doing and operating. Now, if I ask something that, because I don't have a legal mind, if I ask a question that you can't answer right now, educate me and let me know if that's something that you can't speak to. But what is your perspective on that, and how do you feel about it?
Can we get our sister Lonita to answer that question after we take a short break for the calls? We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Did you know that the word alma mater comes from the Latin meaning nurturing mother? One of our primary objectives at Simmons College of Kentucky is to nurture late bloomers. So it doesn't matter if you struggle through high school just to graduate, or even if you earn your GED. We don't look at a student's past, we look at their potential. Simmons College of Kentucky, creating the next generation of thinkers.
Hi, this is Betty Baye. We're the G3, and we're back, and we're with Miss Lonita Baker, renowned attorney in our community, sister girl, and Phyllis Clark, our co-host, was in the middle of a question. Phyllis, you want to rerun that again?
Sure. So I was just wanting to get your perspective, Lonita, on what you think about the Department of Justice now starting to weigh in on LMPD. Can you share a little bit about what your thoughts are?
Yeah. So I'm definitely in favor of the Department of Justice coming in and doing the patterns and practice investigation that they announced here recently. Just before announcing that they were doing that in Louisville, they announced that they were doing it in Minneapolis. We know that under the prior presidential administration, I don't say that man's name, so that administration, that he did not have the Department of Justice doing the patterns and practices investigation. He ceased them. We're not going to do any consent decrees. We're going to let local police departments do what local police departments do. One of the things that President Biden campaigned on was getting out there and having the Department of Justice resume these investigations. So I'm glad that we're seeing that within the first couple of months of his administration. Now, what we actually have to have follow the investigation, because we know there's patterns and practices there, because Breonna Taylor isn't the first scandal we've seen from LMPD in the last 5 years, right? We've had so many over the last few years that it's necessary. We needed it. And so we have to have change come out of it. And I think really only the Department of Justice can get the change that's required, because they can control how much financial support they're going to provide to the department. If you don't change, then we're going to withhold these federal dollars.
Wow.
So I think it's necessary, but I do want to point out it's separate and different from the federal investigation, the criminal investigations that the FBI is still conducting as it relates to the officers involved in the death of Breonna Taylor. The patterns and practices is to investigate the department as a whole, and they'll go back over some of the unconstitutional traffic stops that we've seen, the Explorer scandal, use of force violations, which would include some of the ways that the officers interacted with protesters over the last year. So it's going to be
about last week.
But last week,
Right.
really,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, the thing about this federal consent decree, I think they may wish that they had put Garland, they wish they had put him on the Supreme Court, because now he's going to be focused on what's going on in this city. And while a lot of people were saying that they welcome it, I know that it would not have been possible without the brothers and the sisters who have been out in the streets for over a year protesting, including a couple of supporters who lost their lives, in the middle of the protest for Breonna. I mean, this is serious stuff here. And we're sitting here just shortly after the verdict in the Chauvin case in Minneapolis in the murder of George Floyd. And we got or they got 3 guilties for that police officer, Chauvin, and the rest of them will go on trial. However, the day after the George Floyd decision, another man was killed by police down in North Elizabeth, North Carolina, shot in the head, according to the family's own autopsy, shot 5 times, sitting in his car with his hands on the steering wheel. Then I think not far from where George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, young Toledo, Adam Toledo, his name, 13 years old, killed by police officer with his hands in the air, according to the videotapes. And then there's the Michaela Bryant, 16, in Columbus, Ohio, young girl who, according to the family, was the one calling the police, who ended up being killed by police because somebody was attacking her with a knife. We've got to work that out. We've seen the case of the young Afro-Latino brother in his military uniform, forced for a traffic violation, they said, even though it was clear that he had his tags on the car, stretched out on the ground and literally threatened. What is this thing with this inability to de-escalate? We keep talking about the training for the police, but it seems to me that there's also like an attitude about a sort of a resentment that finally attention is being paid to this. Finally, what is this, 40 years after Rodney King, of which there also was a videotape that we could see what happened to Rodney King. The police seem to be also more agitated that the cover is being pulled off them. All of these cases. So for those of us who celebrated the Chauvin victory, this is not over. The Black people are still being killed, by the police.
Yeah. And I say the Chauvin conviction, that was like a must. Like, you can't kill someone on camera so brazenly and not be found guilty. So my thing is, like, I know a lot of people, I think a lot of people gave too much credit to that conviction as being a turning point in our justice system. Like, no, that would have been if you don't convict him, like,
Right.
we really, the real test is going to be, are his accomplices, are they going to be found guilty? When are we going to, at least indict officers when it's not caught on camera or when it's not so blatantly, those officers. So we haven't gotten that real test to say, has the justice system, is it changing? I just don't think we're there yet. And then to your point, Betty, everyone's like, oh, we welcome the DOJ. What are they going to say? We don't want them here.
Right, exactly.
like they kept saying that. Yeah, they kept saying that in the press. We welcome them. I'm like, what are you gonna say? Don't come.
Right. Well, Lonita, on the other spectrum too, I worry for our young men, right? I worry for, we have a co-host, Michelle Porter, who has sons. We have brothers, we have nephews, we have uncles, fathers. I can just, name so many. We have male figures in our family that if they just go to the grocery store, and just because of the color of their skin, they're being pulled over. What is your advice? And there's no excuse. And I'm not making excuses, but on the other spectrum, what do you tell families? If you get pulled over, what should we do? What should our brothers do? Our sons? What should they do?
So there's a couple of things, and I apologize if my doorbell ring again. I'm ignoring the people that are out there, but it rang, and so if it rings again, I'm staying with you all. But the advice that I give to people is, to do whatever I'm always do whatever it takes to make it home. If your rights are violated, you don't have to sit there and argue with the cop. And it's, again, I'm not placing blame on anyone that does feel like they want to defend themselves. Get home, call the lawyer. Like, that's your first priority. Get home and then protect your rights by calling a lawyer. Have your license, insurance, things like that easily accessible so that you're not having to dig around or reach for anything. We talked about Lieutenant Navarro in Virginia, the Army lieutenant. And I think when we saw the fear in that man, I think all of us was like, the officer kept saying, get out of the car, get out of the car. He's like, I'm not moving my hands. And as we're watching that, we're like, I wouldn't move my hand. I'm not going to take
Right.
my hand off I'm not going to reach for my seatbelt so you can say I feared for my life. I thought he was going for a weapon, because that officer was very uptight and just yelled. Like I was like,
Yeah.
what is wrong with him?
Yeah.
All because he did it. You can do that. And I advise everyone to do exactly what Lieutenant Navarro did. And if you on a highway and they trying to pull you over, turn your flashers on. It's at nighttime, especially. Drive to a well-lit area. That's what Lieutenant Navarro did. He went to the gas station. You have every right to do that, and you should do that. I just don't trust to be on a dark road, a dark highway,
Right.
when being pulled over. I need witnesses.
Mhm.
I know with iPhones, they have the Siri, I'm getting pulled over now. Like, we have to, or get a dash cam if you have to. But by any means,
Wow.
protect yourself and just have things easily accessible and reachable for you, so that you're not having to dig around.
Mhm.
But definitely don't get into a screaming match with officers, because it seems like all of them have little man syndrome. No offense to the little guys, but y'all know what I mean when I say that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. They're all on edge and ready to just
Right.
react at any moment without regard to life.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
that was the thing. I saw a video with a drunk police officer, and the brother was like, Navarro. He tried to be very calm, like what's wrong with you? Why are you acting this way? So that whole notion of de-escalation. When I grew up with Danny the cop, we all loved Danny the cop. Danny knew us. He was in our community. We all knew Danny. I don't know if Danny ever drew his gun on anybody. And we had drugs and everything that was going on. I never heard of Danny killing anybody, because he knew the community. And I think we still have this issue of people who, when they come to our community, they think that they're going on a safari hunt or something, and that we are not human beings. And I think it is a very scary time. And I think now with the videotapes, it's making it better. But I can imagine the hundreds of thousands of incidents where there is no videotape.
Right.
And where there is no, we don't know about it, so the community cannot get out and protest. And so now the cover is being drawn up. But I think we would be mistaken. I agree with you, Lonita, and that the fact that we cannot say, as we tried to do when Obama got elected, that we are post-racial. The Chauvin verdict does not make us into a new era of justice. We still have to watch for ourselves that we have police officers who want to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner on the streets of our city. And maybe by the time this show airs, who knows how many other Black people will be killed and murdered unarmed, while armed white people who have shot up rooms of people, movie theaters, schools and stuff, they are taken alive. Unless they kill themselves, they tend to come out alive. And so it is the question that maybe people don't see the humanity in us. And we've really got to make sure that blue line, the way it crumpled in the case of Chauvin, that the police officers who say that they are good police officers, they need to be responsible. They need to police themselves and say, this guy is bad. And they need to not support this, because they're always telling Black people, why don't y'all Black people do something about Black people who are committing crimes? Well, why don't the police officers do something about police officers who act criminally?
Great point.
And to your point, Betty, about officers being in the community and knowing those around them, that was one of the areas that we negotiated in the reform, as that was a part of the Breonna Taylor settlement. Is that they give it incentives for officers to live within the community. And since you can't make people live in the community, well, if you don't want to live there, at least take these 2 hours of paid time, 2 hours out of your schedule to volunteer within the communities that you police. Because if you get to know the people, then we're not monsters. We're not monsters anyway, but the more we become familiar with you and the more you become familiar with us, you're less likely to pour your gun on us because Timmy up the street, Yeah.
And have you seen that executed? I mean, are they being intentional about it?
We meet with the mayor's. We have an upcoming meeting with the mayor's office to see if officers are taking advantage of that. Last I heard, I don't think that very many are, and I hope that changes.
Me too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Lonita, I want to ask you. I want to pivot for a moment and let's just talk about you. So I've known you for a long time. I've seen your educational journey back at the University of Louisville, as we said off camera. But so just think about that whole walk and talk a little bit about how you've taken care of yourself, in all of this. I know day in, day out, you're reading briefs, you're working on potentially other cases, and you're moving through all of this. And I know that, as Black women, the stressors and the other things that we do and look forward to doing in our lives, it's still something else. There will always be something else to be done. So with all of the attention on what you're doing, and it's not over. It's almost like it's just beginning. So talk about your self-care rituals, routines, things you've been doing. Our audience members are always interested in understanding how other women, take care of themselves. So can you share a little bit of that with us?
Yeah. So I definitely keep my faith center, because I have to stay grounded in some way. Hanging out with my sorority sisters, my line sisters. There's times like they just knew I always joke because I'm like, I live far out. Like I'm in Louisville, but I'm barely in Louisville. And I joke with my family, cause my mom, she showed up unannounced the other day. I said, y'all know I moved this far out so people didn't show up unannounced. It don't work that way. And I still love when they show up, but hanging out with my friends' family, one of my favorite things is definitely get my hair done. I have to, that's self-care. I mean, it's self-care.
Yeah, it is.
I watch my reality TV because it just gives me such great pleasure. I don't know. I don't watch the news very much because when you're in this type of work, if I watch the news, I'd be walking around straight depressed. So people say, did you see? And I'm I get the things from social media. But if I did social media and the news and my work, I'd be a crazy woman. So I barely watch it. I've been on the news and I never catch myself. People are like, oh, I saw you. And I'm like, I did. I mean, I recorded it, but I didn't see it. But, just really, you really do have to take time out for yourself, meditate, just sit and think. And then I always recenter and I said at the beginning that I focus on, I made sure to keep God leading me through the fight of 2020 with Breonna's case. But I do that also in general. God, am I still, doing? Now, sometimes I wish he yelled at me a little bit more so I know, I need to go now. Sometimes it's just too subtle. God,
well, that's a grace.
We're coming to the end of our conversation, and that sister talk is always needed. And and for some people who are envious of people who are in the spotlight, like Lonita Baker has been, you got to know that it comes with a price. It's not free. And so don't envy somebody because they're showing up on your TV and stuff. It's a lot to go with that. And we try to go out with a good gossip. And Stephanie has our good gossip. And Lonita, thank you so much. But we're going to have the good gossip. Stay with us because we want to know after she finishes how people can reach you, girl. We ain't telling them to call them at your house and all of that.
Yeah, we don't want people showing up on your doorstep. So that's a great segue to our good gossip for the evening, which is titled Biblical Justice. As Christ followers, the answer is simple. Our sense of justice is imparted to us by our Creator God. He is loving, kind, and merciful, and he is always righteous, holy, and just. He has told you, oh man, what is good? And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? That comes from Micah 6:8. Pursuing biblical justice means we follow God's way to make right that which is wrong. And we look to scripture to define what is right. God is just. It is part of his character, which means he is always just. He cannot be unjust. And he defines and sets the standard for justice. That is our good gossip for this
Well,
evening.
you go ahead, Miss Stephanie. You are a big girl. and Lonita, will you tell our audience how they can reach you? Don't go to her house, y'all. Do not try to do her because she's busy. She got family and stuff. But how can people reach you that might have legal issues or something that that they might want to discuss and get some advice? Because I know your law firm has several lawyers, does it not?
Yes, we do have several lawyers. So law firm is AguiarInjuryLawyers.com. It's AGUIAR lawyers.com. My personal blog, if you just want to see what I might be writing about, I don't write enough on there, but I'm getting there, is divaattorney.com. My Instagram and Twitter are the same, diva_attorney.com. And you do spell attorney out, but and then I'm on Facebook at Lonita Baker. So you can reach me at any of those places.
And any AKA that you run into, they will tell you how to reach Lonita, because she is sorority sisters, and I love them. I'm surrounded by all the pink and green with my red on. But I love what you said about the sorority sisters. We're going to do a show later about sisterhood and how sororities work, because some people think it's just like a fun club. And we really do save each other. And we are Panhellenic, and that means a lot to have the sisterhood in tough times. So we thank you, Lonita Baker. I say Lonita Baker because I just love it. Makes me think of Anita Baker. And I want to thank my co-host, Stephanie. Baby, where can they reach you?
You can always reach me at theagileentrepreneur.net. All my social media outlets are listed on my website.
And Miss Phyllis.
Yes, on Instagram, you can find me at I am Phyllis Clark. And if you want to shoot me an email, it's Phyllis at phyllisclarkconsulting.com.
And you can reach me at bettybaye.com. And I may or may not see your message because I'm not on all those social medias. And I am on Facebook, however, like most of the old people. Facebook, just look up Betty Winston Baye and you'll find me there. So thanks once again, my sister.
Thank you, Lonita. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lonita, for being with us and discussing this important issue. So we'll see you next time.
Bye.